This video shows the replacement of a picket fence in our backyard. The old fence was pretty raggedy, as you can see, and was barely standing. As you can see from this next picture, it had been deteriorated pretty badly and hadn't been painted in a few years, but it was really rotted out at the bottom, so there was no strength to hold the fence up. As you can see at the bottom of these photos, the posts are not even attached to the ground any longer, so the fence is basically just balanced on the ledge. Before I removed the old fence, I took a lot of measurements to make sure I knew exactly the dimensions of that fence, and I was going to try to replicate it as closely as possible, but not necessarily exactly. It didn't take much to remove the old fence. As I mentioned, it was just standing balanced on the ledge, so taking a few pieces apart, the rest of the fence just basically fell off. After I removed the fence, I had to prepare the slots in the concrete wall where the new post would be mounted. They were pre-existing slots except for one where I had to use a saw to cut the slot and then a masonry drill to make Swiss cheese holes in the concrete and then chisel them out by hand. As you can see here, that was about a 2-foot deep slot I had to chisel. And it also resulted in the only injury I suffered during this project when a piece of steel spalded off of the chisel. The piece went through my shirt and embedded itself in my abdomen. It was not very deep, so I was able to remove it easily with a pair of tweezers. After I'd completed the slots in the wall for the new post, I was able to start building the forms that would hold the concrete to hold those posts in place. Here I'm temporarily using a wooden 2x4 as a template. The posts that I actually used in the fence were 1/8 inch thick steel 2x4s that I had to purchase as a 20-foot length and then cut to size for each post. I put in the new forms for the other post as well. As you can see in this picture, I'm using a clamp to hold the post at the right elevation above the ground. Once I had this first post positioned, it served as my guide to make sure the remaining posts were level. I did this by running a string line from the top of that post across the other post to ensure they were all level. Once I had them level and plumb, I was now able to pour the concrete into the remaining post holes. I didn't use standard fence post cement, which contains large aggregate, large stones. Instead, I used a fine mortar, which has fine-grained sand instead, which could be driven into all the cracks and crevices around the post to ensure a tight seal. Once the concrete was set, I was now ready to start painting the post. Since the fence was going to be white, I painted all of the posts white as well. I used masking tape and newspapers to protect the areas that I didn't want to spray paint. I also bought some plastic plugs that fit perfectly into the tops of the steel 2x4s to prevent water intrusion or other things from getting down inside of the post. I also painted these white to match the post. I then painted all of the hardware that would hold the rails in place and painted those on both sides before I attached them to the post. I then painted my rails as well on all sides to ensure they were completely covered and minimize any sort of deterioration. I then attached the rails to the post using metal brackets and screws. I placed the top rail 8 inches below the top of the picket and the bottom rail 8 inches above the bottom of the picket. I had several spare panels from an earlier fence project. These panels were 8 feet long and 7.5 inches wide, so they were perfect for making pickets that were 4 feet long and 2.5 inches wide. I cut the 8-foot panels in half into 4-foot sections, and then I cut each of those 4-foot sections into 3 2.5-inch wide pickets. I then primed and put multiple coats of paint on all sides of the pickets. It was now time to move the large cactus that was potted and sitting near the fence I was about to replace. So I had to find a new home for it, and I found another spot and was able to move it with a dolly and some cardboard protection around it to protect me from the spines. I'm now able to finish the project by attaching the pickets. It's pretty straightforward, starting at one end, making sure the picket is aligned with the top of the post and level. Then you attach the top of the picket with a screw, and making sure the picket is still level, attach the bottom of the picket with a screw. I have a spacer picket that I use to ensure the distance between each picket is exactly the same. I also had to replace a small piece of fence that was on the other side of the gate and next to the house. It was mounted in such a way that it was attached to the house by these spar pieces, and that was basically the only thing holding that portion of the fence up. Again, at the ground, it had rotted away, so there was really no support other than the sidewalk holding the fence up. I replaced the wooden post with a steel post that would provide strong support for that portion of the fence, as well as a strong, stable place for the gate to attach. This post was anchored 24 inches into the ground with fine mortar cement. I then prepped the post for painting, as well as the hardware from the gate kit. The gate kit is basically some metal assembly pieces that allow you to attach 2x4s in order to form a perfectly rectangular gate of any size that you measure. Here I'm painting the gate kit as well, making sure that it's coated on all surfaces, including the screws. I'm using some nice straight pressure treated 2x4s to make the gate frame. The width of the frame is determined by the distance between the two posts at the opening and subtract 1/2 inch. The height of the gate frame is determined by the rail height on the main portion of the fence. Before attaching the screws, I painted all of these parts. I now attach the gate frame hinge to the steel post, making sure that the top rail is in alignment with the fence rail. I also attached the latch to the steel post, including drilling a hole through the post to run a cable so that the gate could be opened from either side. Finally, I attached the remaining pickets to the gate and to the short portion of the fence next to the house. This included trimming one of the pickets to fit the slope of the house. Now the fence is complete. I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to sharing another project with you soon.